We started in Glendale, Arizona in 1990. We moved to Arizona in '87, and I resisted the urge for a few years, but I got talked into going to visit a horse that needed a home, and that started us. We moved to Chino Valley in 1993. At that time, we only had 6 horses. We were doing everything out of pocket. In '95, the borough floodgates opened, and 96, we became a 501c3 nonprofit corporation, got our IRS ruling, and been having fun ever since.
All right. What is the difference between a sanctuary and a rescue?
Well, sanctuary, the primary purpose, and we are a sanctuary, is to give lifetime homes to animals that had no other place to go and tend to be physically challenged. For instance, the horses, most of the horses here have bad knees. They're not ever going to be physically sound enough to be, quote, used, end quote. And therefore, it's really hard for them to find a place. Where a rescue is, the primary purpose of a rescue is to take them in, get them rehabilitated, and place them again, creating space for more.
Hold on real quick.
How to get off the phone, they're doing the
So
interview.
this is a right-hand microphone, this is your left-hand
So
microphone?
I'm going to turn my phone off for about an hour or half hour, whatever. But he is here. Yes. I'll find out, Denise. I don't know if she will or not. All right. All right. Bye.
Touch base on most of your questions. Whenever you're ready.
HDLM elected at the very beginning to become a sanctuary as opposed to a rescue for several reasons, and the primary one is that the ones that are not usable in the traditional sense need a place to live too, and as the economy got worse, their options became fewer and fewer. So, and the other is a philosophical problem I have. Rescues charge adoption fees, and I don't believe you can morally sell a living creature, and an adoption fee, whatever you want to call it, is a price. And when we have placed, from time to time, we get young, healthy horses that are ready for a smaller situation, ready to learn to be trained, and we will place them if the home is right and if the animal and the humans really click, but there is never a fee.
What are your goals for HDLM?
Our long-term goals are to get to our long-term goals for the sanctuary is an expanded vision. The animals will always be the primary reason we're here, but we've learned over the years that the most important,
Just make sure look over your
the primary reason that animals need sanctuary and rescue is that humans have a lot to learn about the rest of the world and the rest of life. And one of our important, maybe our single most important duty is to help plant seeds, help get people to understand how we fit in the big picture and we're not separate from or in charge of.
So this isn't just about necessarily helping horses or helping them recuperate or giving them a place to live, but it's also about changing thinking.
It is especially about changing thinking because, you know, I can come back lifetime after lifetime and do this, but there's no reason to. If we can get human beings to change, then animals can live where they want to and be left alone as opposed to having to be in pens. So the most important thing we can do, and I've had debates with people about this, when I tell them that animal care is extremely important, but it is not the most important function here. It is to help change human beings. We can't change the world ourselves, but we can do our part. And so that at some point in the future, hopefully not too long, we won't need to exist.
Do you want to come in?
All right, I'm going to
Help us.
Dana's getting a day off.
Pardon me?
And Dana's getting a day off. Loving it.
What's with that?
I know. She's, I don't know, interested in meeting a man and having children, that type of thing, you know, that kind of craziness.
Too many.
I should have said yes to this. Keep getting snapped.
It's not quite as easy.
Do not interfere with the subject.
Curses.
We weren't finished with the
Oh, we're okay, then yeah, by all means continue with what you're saying.
So in addition to helping humans learn about our place in the world, our long-term vision includes a school, which would be a residential school for kids who would learn everything they need to education-wise for whatever state we're in. But there would also be instructors from every major spiritual group in the world, so that they got a real education, and they would also spend time with the animals and learn animal communication. And we like to think that for every one of those we could turn out equipped to live any place in the world, then there's another 1,000 or so human beings along the path. So,
All right, well, who makes the decisions around here?
well, the truth of the matter is the residents make the decisions. Any major question is presented to them by one of our animal communicators or by me. If I don't have a vested interest in the answer, I'll do it. But, and as far as placements, we find out who is interested, and the humans have to come here and we just observe the interaction. And you can tell pretty quickly whether the horse is interested in somebody or the burro is interested in somebody, and they will tell us all we need to know about the human being. So it's a lot easier if we don't have to make all the decisions.
Right. So it's more of a kind of collaborative
It is.
process with everyone here. What made you decide to do it that way?
Well, we had heard about animal communication, and shortly after we moved to Chino Valley, we had 6 horses, and we couldn't turn them all out together. 2 would be attacking 2 other ones, despite all the space. So we arranged a session with a lady that we became very familiar with, used her a lot. And it was kind of like a labor negotiation. Okay, here's the deal, guys. You want to be out there all day, you have to get along. You can't attack each other. You got plenty of space. You don't have to, and the rule is still, you have to get along. You don't have to like anybody, but you have to get along. And it was interesting the next morning when we turned them out together, and ever since then, it's been peaceful. So,
How does HDLM view animals?
as equals. In some ways, now they don't have opposable thumbs, but their communication is infinitely more technologically advanced than ours is. They can talk to anybody in the world instantly, which is telepathic communication. Humans are born with that ability, and little kids do it, and they talk to creatures their parents can't see. The parents tell them it's imaginary, it doesn't work, and pretty soon, unfortunately, the child believes the adult, and that ability is lost, but it's never completely lost. So when we have people conducting workshops and allegedly teaching animal communication, it's really just relearning it.
So when you have kids out here, then do you notice kids are more easy, or it's easier for them to communicate with animals than someone like myself?
It's
off the
much
street?
easier for kids. At the most unbelievable example of that, we used to do what we called carrot toss on Sunday. When funding was a little better, we would feed 500 pounds of carrots to the big burro herd every Sunday. And a lady pulled up in an SUV, and she got out and came over to the fence and started handing out carrots. And this was June or July, so it was pretty warm, and she left her back door open, which I didn't understand until I heard fussing from a child. And she went over, got the kid out of the car, and immediately went to the fence like she was heading for a particular burro who came up to the fence, a burro named Peanut. They're forehead to forehead, and this 4-month-old boy's lips are moving. So when they finished, and they both walked away from the fence, I asked her if she knew what was going on, and she said, yeah. So I said, good, there's a kid that doesn't have to relearn it at a later age.
That's pretty crazy.
And a lot of visitors, people bring their grandkids out or parents with young kids.
How do parents react? Like when you bring this up to them, do they believe what you're saying, or do you?
15
can you
years
tell they're
ago,
skeptical?
a lot of eyes rolled up and ears closed, and they pretty soon they leave. And anymore, that's not an issue. People are very interested, and the parents are aware enough to realize most of the time the kids aren't. This is not make believe. Some parents will call us and tell us they were fascinated by what the kids were telling them on the way home that they picked up from the animals. So these are kids who have not been turned off to the whole concept.
They don't. They don't have the concept of being ashamed of it or being
Right.
shy of admitting it or talking about it. That's a cool thing. What would you say the most rewarding thing is that you do?
That was one of the most rewarding things, but it's so incredibly rewarding to get a horse that's at the very least been really neglected and real thin and kind of given up on life. And we have a feeding program that we can put weight back on safely rather quickly, and then when they get their weight back and their health back, their personality comes back out, and it's super.
So just kind of, you would say, then rehabilitating the horses and
Yeah.
helping them become social again.
And mostly, to be blunt about it, all we do in rehabilitation is take care of the physical needs, because the rest of the animals will take care of the emotional needs. And animals are by nature much more spiritual than humans act, at least. So they're the primary.
Now, how can you tell the horses are spiritual? What makes you? What kind of intuition do you have?
Well, it's in conversation. And as a matter of fact, we have a book that should be printed by late May, early June. We started in 1997. We had a friend in Oakland who would talk to the new animals when they came. We'd ask her to explain to them that our intention was this was their lifetime home. Let them know that they were going to be safe and well cared for. Find out what their names are, because they all have names, and most of the time it's not whatever a human has given them. And the wild animals, wild burros come in from Death Valley or BLM, they all have names. So very shortly after we started having her welcome everybody, we added one more question, and the question is, what do you have to share with humans in general? And the book has been 15 years in the making. There's about 400 messages in it, and 20-some communicators have worked on it.
So it's a kind of a mashup of like conversations or things you've heard from
It is
horses
conversations, it is.
Wow.
And specifically to what would you like to share with humans in general? Sometimes there's personal messages in there for us. Some of those got in the book, some of them didn't. But if anybody reads the book with an open mind, there can be no doubt about what animals are. And the amazing thing is, they have lived for eons with us, making their life miserable. And they still want to help us learn what we need to learn to get along with everybody. So
What would you say the hardest thing is that you have to do?
the hardest thing is not having room for somebody. That's
So you have to turn horses away frequently, or
a lot more frequently than I would like. We get emails several times a week with sometimes 1 or 2, sometimes 10 or 20. There's one email we get that is horses all over the country that need places. And sometimes that's huge. There's a couple of emails within Arizona. And again, as the economy, it's starting to get better, but people are still, they may have had a horse 20 years, barrel raced or roped on them, and as soon as the horse is not physically able to continue that level, many people they're disposable. They haven't grasped yet that
it's
they're
just a
living
tool.
beings.
It's just a tool to them.
Yeah, it's a tool. So, and there's a lot of that right now. And when we have space, I'm getting pretty good at knowing which one on the email is the one that really needs to be here. And we finished the new barn that we're sitting in right now about July or August of last year. For the first time in 4 or 5 years, all the horses and mules had a covered stall at night. So we said, okay, unless we have space, we're not taking anymore.
So this is where all the horses come in and
The
sleep?
horses between this and the old metal barn, there are 34 stalls, and we're adding 2 on the outside of that one that will house 2 that are without covered stall right now.
So do you know what happens to the horses that you can't accept? I mean, they just keep asking other people to take them
Well,
in, or?
Sadly, I don't know. When the livestock auction in Chino Valley was letting horses be sold there, a lot of rescue groups would go try to prevent them, get them from the killer buyers, because if they were bought by the killer buyers, they went to Mexico for slaughter. The estimates are about 100,000 horses from the US are slaughtered for food in Mexico and Canada every year. There are a number of groups working on a petition to get Congress to ban even exporting horses for slaughter, for human consumption. And that's a wonderful thing to do, but it begs the bigger issue. Where do those 100,000 horses go? You know, there have been pictures on the internet of skeletons, some of them still alive, some of them not, in particular around Tucson, where people are just taking them out and letting them loose in the desert. And stories that are confirmed that somebody would go trail riding, they'd take a 4-horse trailer route with their horses, they'd come back from trail riding, there'd be 4 horses in the trailer. So it is, you know, I have a major problem with slaughtering horses for, especially for human consumption, but we have to have something to do with them. And if you take care of them the way we do here, 100,000 horses is about $50 million a year. So banning is important, but if you don't solve the rest of the problem, you may just create a worse fate for them.
So where do you get your money for all your funding for this?
Ours is, we're a 501c3, it's strictly donations. We've been incredibly lucky in the last 2 years. There's a woman who, if she ever isn't anonymous, we'll never see her again. But she funded this whole new barn. She's funded several things here right now. She is giving us money specifically to do direct mail so that we can increase our donor base. And it's working.
Do you have multiple donors then? Like, I mean, they're giving you money on the regular, or?
We have some monthly donors. We have some that give anything from 1 to 4 times a year. We do a newsletter 4 times a year or so.
What other ways do you try to come up with money?
We have tried to do events. One of the risks with events is you can't do an event bigger than you can afford to lose. So the big fundraisers are just not possible for us now. You know, do a dinner and a dance or something for a couple thousand people, you've got to have the money up front, and if it falls on its face,
You gotta be able to
you're out a lot.
afford
So,
that loss.
we were really lucky. There's a website called Great Nonprofits. It's connected with GuideStar and Charity Navigator, and we send emails to or in the newsletter to our donors, or regular email people, or newsletter people, and they're invited to write a review on us. And based on those reviews, we were picked to be one of 10 impact local charities in March of 2012, and then everybody that read Huffington Post that chose to vote could vote. And we came out on top, so hopefully that will, again, just the PR of being on there should help too.
Yeah, get you some more attention and stuff, absolutely.
But our donors are all over the country.
When it comes to like communicating with the horses, I mean, how does that go about? Like, how do you like even start a conversation with a horse? Or I mean, you just go up to them and just kind of.
You don't have to physically be here. Most of our communicators are not here. Most of the people who worked on the book have never been here. Some people want a picture. Most communicators can work without a picture. You know, how does my voice get to that animal? I can't tell you. One of our first communicator, if you remember the killer whale named Willie that was finally released from captivity, and Jerry worked with him a lot when he was in the North Atlantic. It just works. And what's interesting about it, if somebody has some doubts, then find a communicator. I've got a bunch that I'll recommend if anybody wants to know, but you can ask them questions that you know the answer to if you feel the need to test. But as I say, when you have an experience like 6 horses that wouldn't get along one day and the next day it's all fine. That was all I needed to see.
What was that your first experience?
That was
with
our
this?
first experience with an animal communicator.
What was your first experience where you felt like in your head clicked like, hey, I can communicate?
My first experience, I would know things that I didn't know. It's called an instant knowing, and that's a lot of communication happens that way. But I have a mentor who would have group conversations, and she'd have to come out here and tune out conversation to concentrate on what she wanted to do, because they're talking all the time to each other. And now she's somebody who grew up in rural Mississippi, and she used to get the tar beat out of her, and she was threatened with their incarceration. You didn't do that in rural Mississippi when she grew up. Fortunately, she never stopped. She just stopped talking about it. I met her, the first animal communicator we got here in Chino Valley to do a workshop. We had just agreed on the date. The next day I get a phone call from somebody in Iowa who wants to sign up for the workshop. And I don't mind sharing, at that point in my life, that made me pretty nervous. I said, how did you know about this? And she said, I don't know, does it matter? And I said, I guess not. She came to the workshop, and I thought she was a nutcase, she was so good, until an exercise involving a horse that I knew. She did a physical on that horse. And every injury and every illness she had. And a couple things, she described how it happened. We didn't know exactly what happened for the injury. So, and I kept in touch with her. She ended up moving to Rimrock, which is over near Montezuma as well. And 3 or 4 years ago, a gentleman was doing a video here, and he wanted to take a little bit of the time, and we got Janice here for a discussion between the two of us. And she said, do you want to know how I knew about that workshop? And I said, yeah, I really do. And she said, your phone number was written in the clouds. Now I know her well enough. She'll be riding with me someplace, and she'll be taking pictures of the clouds, and when she develops the film or looks at it, because she's using digital cameras, there's all kinds of stuff there. And she sees it without the camera. So I didn't doubt her at that point, and she said, I knew I had to call you, and I was pretty sure what it was for. And she said, did you want me to tell you back then? And I said, no. I would have hung up on you. I wouldn't have told you anything.
All right, I got just, we went through your questions, it looks like, unless there's anything you want to add. I just have 2 things you can answer,
Okay.
briefly. One is, why is this important? Why do you feel it's important? And 2, what can humans do to improve as far as, their treatment of animals and of horses and stuff? You just want to answer those?
Why do I feel this is important? Because I'm tired of the way animals and trees and plants and everything else are treated as throwaway commodities. And to be blunt, the arrogance of humans to think that we're on the top of the pile. But I know that human beings will enjoy being here more once they don't feel the need to be superior. And apparently, I made this contract before being born this particular time. It just took me a long time to figure it out. I'm still learning some of the fine print, but there are a number of people who are devoting this lifetime to try to make some progress here. And I see progress. This area is pretty rural. And when we talk about animal communication, when we first got here, yeah, we pretty soon we started hearing the rumors that we were devil worshippers. And that
Again, I mean,
stuff
that's-
doesn't happen anymore.
It's human nature because of the superiority concept of your ego. Is, you know, your belief has to be right, and someone else's is different than you know.
Yeah, and we're that way within the human family. So
Like
it's
that, yeah.
not, it's understandable that we have to get over that hurdle, or at least understand that we're not necessarily right there in order to move it on. And it's sad that it seems as if humans have always had to have somebody to feel superior to. And let's say we change our attitude on somewhat on race. Then it's ethnicity. It's
Always
when does the light bulb come on here, guys? And people know more about their animals than they think they do. I am amazed by the people who are extremely kind to their animals, still believing them to be, you know, on the intellectual level of a baby. That takes a lot, but they're missing so much.
I didn't get when we first came in. How much property do you have? How big
8
is it?
acres.
8 acres, and then you have the 2 sleeping areas for the horses.
We have a big shelter over there that's missing its roof right now.
Any other like any like key features you just want to tell me while we got the thing rolling? Like you want to run down?
When we get the new replacement TX18 truck tarp material on the large burrow shelter, all the animals will have access to covered shelter.
Nice. And then, all right, so you're doing upgrades constantly right here?
We're
too?
doing upgrades constantly. We are at a point where we're not going to be able to take many more until the next miracle that gets us a few thousand acres where there's grass, which will happen. I don't know when, but.
And just before we stop, because we're running out of tape here, what can people do to help this place? Like help it run, help it function, to contribute?
Well, we can always use contributions there, tax deductible. We can use more volunteers to help with pen cleaning and keeping the water clean and full. And if we get more people to help with events, we'll do more events. That's another way that we get to meet people and bring in some revenue. And for some reason, we have some wonderful supporters, but very seldom does that turn into volunteers. And that's a commitment. And that's a good thing about being a volunteer. If you don't show up, what's anybody going to do? But if you made a commitment, then hopefully you'll work at keeping it.
All right, is there anything else you want to throw in there? Or? That was a really good interview. That was cool. A lot of good